All right, and we're live for week 5. This is a new SEC podcast. I'm Randall Adet Jr. We got Hunter Ziesman here. Hunter, we got another week of football coming up. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, man. It's week 5. It's a week I've been looking forward to for a hot minute because we got Alabama, Georgia. For those that don't know on here, Alabama alumni, huge Alabama fan. Been waiting for this game. It's not a SEC championship and it's not the national championship or playoffs. We're getting a regular season Alabama, Georgia. I'm pumped.
Yeah,
Really.
I can only imagine the feelings. Obviously, Alabama played Georgia last year in the SEC championship. Alabama was able to win that. There's been some alternating in this series with Alabama dominating, but we get our first regular season matchup in a while here, so that should be fun.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, it's the game I'm most excited for. I hate I'm not going to be there at the game because it's like $1,000 a ticket. But other than that, I mean, there's other SEC teams that are playing big games this week too. Like we're getting Ole Miss finally playing somebody, which is going to be good.
Yeah, Ole Miss is getting their SEC debut game for the season with Kentucky, so that'll be a really fun one. And Texas gets their first SEC game ever in their history in conference with Mississippi State, so really interesting to see that one there. And then even LSU has a pretty interesting one with South Alabama. South Alabama's offense has looked really impressive. I mean, they put up 87 points at one point this season, so could be a good test for LSU from the Group of 5 level. But
Yeah,
it's nothing like the Alabama Georgia game. Like that is
no.
the headliner for this week, hands down.
Yeah, it's the 5th straight week now. College game day going to an SEC game. So they'll be in Tuscaloosa this week. I don't think they'll be in the SEC next week. I don't really see anything for them necessarily to be going to unless they want to do some repeats. But it's a big one. It's a big one. It paints the picture, I think, for both teams in the playoffs. If Georgia loses this game or Alabama loses this game, there's still a route to get in the playoffs. But you have to almost feel like if one of these teams wins, it's almost punching the ticket. It's really early, but like
Yeah.
it almost feels that way.
It does have that feel. And this, at least for Georgia, they could probably afford a loss here. But they want this win naturally, of course. And for Alabama, similar position, could afford that loss, but you want this win. This will put you definitively at the top of the conference. It's the first, top 5 matchup against 2 teams in the conference this season. Other opportunities for that coming up here, of course, with Tennessee and Alabama and Georgia and Texas in a couple weeks. So same weekend as well. But this is the first of what looks to be 3 top 5, top 10 matchups in the conference, and it's going to be a really fun one. They got that one at 7:30 p.m. When you look around the country, the things are starting to clear up from different conferences that are potentially posing competition when it comes to the playoff spots for the SEC.
Yeah. And it's how, every conference is going to get somebody, right? For the Power 4 teams. But these conferences want multiple teams to make it. We see in the Big 12, for example, Utah's looking really strong, but there's a lot of teams in those lower spots in the rankings right now that are trying to work their way up. And a lot of them are playing each other this week. We have BYU Baylor, which is a big one, and then OK State and Kansas State. The winners of those games are going to get a huge jump in these rankings and trying to work towards being that second Big 12 team in. So those are 2 more games this week that are huge.
Yeah, those are 2 really big ones that are kind of clearing up that picture. Arizona was in that discussion. They're not necessarily in a marquee game this week, but some of the games that you had mentioned are going to play a key role when it comes to clearing up that Big 12 picture. Some argue the 3rd or 4th best conference outside of the Big 10 and the SEC in no particular order there. But when you look at some of the ACC or ACC-esque games, you have Notre Dame, who took a loss this season, but is 2-1 or 3-1 playing Louisville, who is first or second in the ACC. So that could be a marquee win for Notre Dame, who can only get as high as the 5 seed in the playoffs, or for Louisville, this could be a key ranked win for them when it comes to their resume out of conference, and also pushing them forward in that ACC potential auto bid spot.
Yeah, and for the ACC, Miami, I think coming into this week probably had this game circled with Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech hasn't looked as strong, so Miami huge favorites in that one. I think they should be able to get it done. For the Big 10, Ohio State's been sitting right there at the top rankings with all the SEC teams. As they've been shuffling around Ohio State, they've been sitting there pretty firm. They get their first, at least, decent competition this week in Michigan State. They're big favorites there. But Penn State, Illinois, I think is a big one there for the Big 10.
Yeah, another big one there. I feel like Drew Allar and the team is running under the radar despite the number 9 ranking overall, but they don't have the same star power as Ohio State and Oregon. But this is a great opportunity for a marquee win. Illinois' first time being ranked in a while, I would have to imagine, with Brett Bielema leading the team over there as a coach, and so that should be a fun one. It's going to be going on at 7:30 at night as well, so they're going to be competing for eyeballs against the Georgia Alabama game, but it'll be on.
They're not getting mine. I'm going to be glued to it. I multi-screen every week. That game is getting one set of eyes. I'm going to be with a bunch of Alabama friends, and yeah, it's not getting eyes for me.
No, and I mean it's a decent slate. I mean, even from the group of 5, which that legion of 5 conferences are guaranteed one auto bid. We get to see Boise State taking on Washington State, who is still a member of the Pac-2 or Pac-12, but this could be a marquee win for them. Washington State just beat Washington. Get to see Ashton Genty over there at Boise State, so we'll see what they can do in that game. And then I misspoke earlier, but Utah's playing Arizona, so that is a big game. That's a big one for the Big 12 as well. And then comparatively, Oregon's going to play UCLA. So UCLA has got a pretty tough stretch here with Indiana, LSU, and Oregon back to back. But we'll see how Oregon does against that team compared to what LSU did, and when it comes to some of that round robin of SEC to Big Ten teams.
Yeah, UCLA struggled late in the game with LSU last week. They're finally at home with Oregon. We've seen Oregon have some trouble. They had it earlier on in the year. We mentioned in previous episodes, with Idaho. We saw them struggle, for example. And then Boise State, we know Boise State's a solid team, but giving number 8 Oregon some trouble raises some questions. I don't think UCLA is going to be a huge test, but we know that they can score. We know that they can make a couple of stops. I'm excited for that one, and it's at 11. So it'll be late slate on the West Coast. Pac-12 staying alive.
Right. Hey, I'm sure they're grateful for these West Coast aligned games. I mean, it can really only be Washington versus USC or Oregon versus USC and et cetera, of course. But it's a good slate when it comes to some of these ranked versus ranked matchups and top 25 from other conferences representing in the group of 5. So a lot to be excited for this week 5. In the SEC, Greg Sankey served up one of the best menus, as we mentioned, with this slate of 6 games. There's teams on byes this week with Tennessee and Missouri, but we get to see Ole Miss, we get to see Kentucky, we get to see Arkansas at Texas A&M, but neutral site. This game has been played 9 of the last 10 years in Dallas, where Jerry World, where the Cowboys play. So really fun one there. Always good and entertaining. And so let's just jump right into it, Hunter. The first game we're excited to cover here is Kentucky at Ole Miss. Rebels fans, we're excited to talk about you guys. There's so many good things to point out, and I would think the number one area to point out for Ole Miss is their offense. So Hunter, when you've been looking at their offense, what are some things that stand out to you?
Their offense, and before I don't want to preface, you have to preface this with Ole Miss. The level of competition they've been playing up to this point has been inferior to them. You can only play the guy in front of you, but in those games, they're crushing it. They're, Jackson Dart, yards leader right now in all of college football. Trey Harris, number 2 in receiving yards. They're the number 1 defense in points allowed per game with 5.5. Ole Miss is number 1 in yards per game. Not just rattle off the stats, but they're leading pretty much everything across the board, and they're making it fire nonstop offensively, and they're doing it all behind Jackson Dart. He's got that knowledge, that intellect. He's been there for a while. He's played Kentucky 2 years ago. A lot of these familiar faces, Dane Key and Barry and Brown, were there on the other side of the ball when Ole Miss pulled out a close win there. So offensively, Ole Miss is firing, and it's all behind Jackson Dart, and looking like a Heisman front runner at the front of the pack here.
Yeah, it's he's like I said, he's leading the SEC when it comes to yards and touchdowns, and having this number 1 team in the nation when it comes to yards, right? 670 yards on offense. And Trey Harris is really impressive. And a lot of teams have struggled to stop this team, right? I will say the best team they've played in terms of Power 4 level is bottom 5 in yards allowed in the country with Wake Forest. So that stat is again a byproduct of what Ole Miss did to their defense, but it also could just be a matter of what their schedules looked like. But this game will give us a real test. With that offense, on the other side is Kentucky's defense, which is clearly their anchor point when it comes to this season. This defense is fourth in the SEC in yards allowed at 217 a game, sixth at passing yards with 142 yards a game. I mean, the only teams that are ahead of this team in terms of rushing defense are Ole Miss and Tennessee. Like, this is a SEC championship defense just based on the way it's performing. The challenge has been the offense matching that, excellence. But this defense is really kind of strangleholded certain teams. We didn't see it against South Carolina per se, but we saw it against Georgia. And we've seen it against Ohio and against Southern Miss, and so it'll be really the biggest test for Ole Miss this time around with the Kentucky defense.
Yeah, and what Ole Miss has done successfully so far, they're running majority of their passing plays with play action. They have Henry Parrish Jr. back there, and when you have a threat like that and you're running play action consistently, you're getting the safeties to bite down, and it's giving Jackson Dart his favorite targets wide open across the middle. 9 of his 12 touchdowns this season have been on play action. He's airing it out. His favorite targets are right down the center of the field. And that's where teams have already seen success against this Kentucky defense this year. We know Kentucky's pass rush is solid. The cornerbacks have been playing well. Hardaway and Harrison out there haven't let up a touchdown in coverage, but teams have been attacking those safeties. And that's where Ole Miss's bread and butter is offensively. So if you're Ole Miss, continue to do what you do. If you're Kentucky, you need to figure out how to keep your safeties in good position to stop this deep threat that they have. Kentucky's offense is the big question mark, though.
Yeah, and that's the big question mark that we want to see an answer from Brock Vandagriff. I like, positively speaking, Dane Key is getting his in terms of yards. He is their leading receiver when it comes to yards. Barry Brown, I think because of the lack of passing production that we have seen from Kentucky, that you can tell the team has been trying to just find a way to get the ball in skill players' hands. I think last game collectively we saw a couple touchdowns, from Barry and Brown on the ground and some of these sweet plays. And so we'd like to see more from the passing side. So when I look at my notes when I think about Kentucky, just 58% completion percentage right now in the air from Brock. That's lowest when it comes to the starting quarterbacks in the conference. The running game is averaging about 165 yards per game, bottom 5 in the conference, but still some positives when it comes to looking at Demo Soon Karmbaye. But the passing is it's dead last in the conference. I mean, they went over their average last game with 237 yards, so that was positive against the Group of 5 competition of Ohio, but still no touchdowns in the air. So we're really waiting to see when they get invited to that party when it comes to scoring touchdowns, especially in the air, because it's going to be really hard to beat teams in this conference if you're not scoring touchdowns in the air, especially teams like Ole Miss, whose defense is very, slaughtering when it comes to their rushing defense. But there is some opportunities with their pass defense, which what we've seen from some of the stats.
Yeah, Kentucky offensively, like the last game, after 9 touchdown in quarters consecutively without scoring a touchdown, Brock Vandagriff was able to find some of his receivers in space. You mentioned getting them more involved. They're playmakers. We saw Dane Key with the hurdle down the sideline, which set up that touchdown there for Demi Sumo Karmbaye. You have these guys that if you can get them in space, they can make plays. Vandagriff just needs to settle in and be able to find them, because you're not going to be able to just establish a consistent run game against Ole Miss. They have maybe one of the best run-stuffing linebackers in the country in Chris Paul Jr. And if you're looking to try to run it up the gut, like Kentucky's done so far this season when they're in these tough positions in the passing game, I don't think it's going to work here. If you're Kentucky, though, their pass defenses has been okay. It's been solid. The pass rush has been great. Yeah. You got to play your game, got to provide some help over the top. That's where they're going to attack you. They're going to throw that deep ball. Kentucky defensively just needs to provide some help over the top and take away some of those big chunk plays.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, the formula is exactly what you said, right? Like, really, being able to get those big chunk plays or stop those big chunk plays when it comes for Ole Miss and looking at Kentucky's offense. For Kentucky's offense, they're going to be the major factor for a chance to win in this game. I think if Kentucky's defense can hold Ole Miss to 21. I need to see more from this offense than what they're doing right now, being bottom in the conference in passing, getting Dane Key and Barron Brown more involved in the game in the air. And hopefully this is the week to see it. Obviously they played a couple games of football, but just seeing what the Ole Miss defense has done to G5 opponents in Wake, I need Kentucky to prove to me that they're not a G5 offense. And I haven't seen it thus far. And so I have to go based upon what I've seen thus far.
Yeah. And I'm with you. And, Ole Miss right now, 17.5-point favorites at the time we're filming this. And I don't think, you can beat this Kentucky team, what we've seen, with 13 points. Even if South Carolina would have scored, 7 points, they could have won. I think here I got Ole Miss 24, Kentucky 9, getting a couple field goals, but not really able to finish drives in this game. So I think Ole Miss doesn't cover the spread, but I think that they get it done.
Yeah. I'm going to go 30-12. I think Kentucky gets 1 touchdown and 2 field goals, maybe a missed extra point in there. Ole Miss is able to handle business. They control the time of the possession. You slow down that run game, which they're averaging, giving up 34.5 yards a game on the rushing defense, which is number 1 in the country for Ole Miss. It's showtime. Let's see it against some Power 4 competition in the SEC. I believe in it. You have no reason to not believe in it. And I think this is a pretty warm test for Ole Miss. Kentucky, that defense is, like I said, it's an SEC championship defense. A lot of these categories, the only teams ahead of you are playoff teams as of now in the SEC. So defense should look good. We'll see what the offense can do, but should be a fun one over there.
Texas A&M right now is ranked. They're right there at the end. We saw them drop the game early. You mentioned the neutral site game earlier, Arkansas, Texas A&M. You got to think whichever team comes out of this will be the ranked team, in the AP poll next week. How are you feeling for this game?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good for it, and I feel the way you feel, right? Like, does Arkansas deserve to be ranked? Like, what is A&M from a schedule perspective shown us to be ranked? I think that they have been able to put more complete games together. I think that plays a role when it comes to the rankings. But records wise, they're pretty much the same, and they've played similar competition. But when I think about this game for A&M, who I want to say has won at least the last 2 in the series, this is an opportunity to take advantage and build upon their last game, stack up another win, and start to build some momentum. What we're expecting to kind of see them grow in is going to be some of that passing defense, right? They have a strong pass defense right now, giving up 189 yards per game, top half in the SEC. Want to see what that pass defense can do against Taylor Green, who's coming off of a slower game last week despite the win.
Yeah. You want to see Texas A&M's defense continue to excel, because coming into the year, we were so high on what they could potentially be. And this Arkansas team isn't making it easy for defenses. We've seen some sloppy play, some turnovers, whether that was the interceptions that changed momentum, a couple fumbles here and there. But what they're the best at, this Arkansas team in the country, they're one of the best in third down conversions right now, only behind UCF, Miami, TCU, and Ole Miss. They're right up there and staying on the field. And, Auburn was good at bottling up Jaquindon Jackson and not giving them those short and manageables. And they still got through, on 3rd 10s. We saw the 3rd and 19 that we talked about in the last episode. If you're A&M, you need to get off the field in this game. And bottling up Taylor Green is one thing, but once you get to 3rd and 10, you have to get off the field, because this Arkansas team is really good at keeping that alive.
Yeah, they're really going to keep it alive, and I think for Arkansas, the reason that they're able to do that is that 3-headed monster, right? Taylor Green, Armstrong at receiver, and Jaquindon Jackson at running back. Jaquindon Jackson was slowed down last week to kind of lower that high average per carry that we had talked about in the recap, and so this could potentially be a bounce back game for him. When you look at A&M and their rush defense, it could use some improvement, right? They're giving up about 129.8 yards per game on the rushing side, so that lends well to what Jaquindon Jackson can do, and hopefully for the sake of Arkansas, they can establish the run to control the tempo of this game and keep them in the game, right? I think every one thing I will say about Arkansas is that they've been in every game.
Yeah.
There's not been a game this season they haven't been in. And I've watched a good amount of Arkansas football in years past, and I understand where Sam Pittman's at. And I don't know if he's in that position because they couldn't stay in games because they were in a lot of games or they couldn't win them. But you got to feel good that every game this season, Arkansas has held the lead. They've been in the game. They've had points in the game where they've controlled the tempo. But we need to see it for the entire game. So less turnovers on the offensive side. Taylor Green had 2 turnovers last week. More rushing. We want to see that from Jaquindon Jackson. On the defensive side, this pass defense is dead last in the conference when it comes to yards allowed at 242. But it's being paired against A&M, we've seen improvement from Marcel Reed. But Hunter, tell us a little bit more about where they kind of rank when we look at the pass offensive side for A&M.
Yeah, I mean, for pass offense with A&M, they're spreading the ball around a little bit, but they don't have those big playmakers, right? Like they're a team that Marcel Reed, I mean, 2 games in a row has had pretty similar stats, just shy of 200 yards through the air. They just don't have really any game breakers. Only one wide receiver on their team over 100 yards right now, and that's Cyrus Allen. And a big chunk of that was that 73-yard touchdown that he broke off against Florida. So they haven't really been able to establish themselves in the pass game. They have that committee back led by Le'Veon Moss and are continuing to improve there. From a passing standpoint, they're just not as strong as they could be. But I think there's gaps in this Arkansas defense that they can continue to exploit. Auburn kind of shot themselves in the foot multiple times this game with bad reads, drop passes that led to interceptions. And Arkansas didn't do a whole lot with those turnovers, right? Like 5 turnovers, but they only won by 10 points. Like they were giving the ball right back, or they weren't scoring on the drives. So if you're A&M, the room for error is okay against this defense.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of room for error, but like I'm gonna go out here and boldly, definitively say this is the key to this matchup. On the Arkansas defense, their rush defense is top 4 in the conference, only giving up about 82.8 yards a game. But A&M's rushing offense is off the charts. Top 2 in the conference, top 8 in the nation. 258 yards per game on the ground. So that top 4 matchup defensively against this top 8 rushing offense in the country with Le'Veon Moss and Marcel Reed's feet now, if he plays in the game compared to Connor Wegman, that is going to be the deciding factor on if A&M wins this game or if Arkansas is able to keep their team in the game enough despite potentially any mistakes the offense makes or how efficient they make. If Arkansas's offense plays well, the rush defense does what's done, we see a complete game. Haven't seen that this season. But if both those things align, this is an easy game from Arkansas. If the defense it can show me what they did against Ollie Gordon, then this defense will look fine against A&M, right? But rushing wise, we'll see if A&M's offense can step up to the challenge to go against an opponent like this, which will probably be their second toughest opponent of the season.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities for A&M to score in this game. Arkansas's defense is giving up a lot of chunk plays like we saw from Keandre Lambert-Smith last week. Like I mentioned, they don't have that game breaker, but this Arkansas defense is liable to give up some deep plays. We have good safety play, but the cornerbacks have some, moments of weakness that A&M will be able to take advantage of. The A&M defense, on the other hand, you mentioned Taylor Green. We know what he can do on his legs, extending plays, getting out of the pocket. Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart are going to set those edges for him. We know the right side of Arkansas's line is a little bit weak, right? They've given up 12 pressures on the right side of that line from that tackle there. And, if you can keep Taylor Green in that where he has to become a pocket passer and not improvise, get out of the pocket, that's going to be some saving grace for the DBs there. You don't want to let him get around. You're playing chase down the field, and then he finds a guy open like they did last week. So get to the quarterback if you're A&M. And then for the offense on A&M, I think a key of the game is just keeping Marcel Reed clean. Through the O-line, protect him. He's going to have to make some reads against this tough Arkansas defense from a scheme standpoint. Mm-hmm. And as long as he's making those proper reads, going through progressions, not throwing interceptions, it sounds easy, but that's going to be the key to the game for A&M. I think that they look strong in this one.
Yeah, and you talked about I think Nick Scorton, and he's going to play a good role in terms of the pass defense as well for A&M. And if they can bottle up Taylor Green, similar to what they were able to do in some ways to Riley Leonard, the other mobile quarterback they went against, this is A&M's game. If I'm going to make a prediction on this game, I think I've picked Arkansas for every game this season. So Woo Pig Suey, I'm running it back. I'm going to say 28-21 Arkansas.
Okay. Arkansas right now, 3.5-point dogs, 52.5 the over under. I have A&M winning this one by a field goal at the end. We know they have that strong kicker, Randy Bond there. I have him maybe kicking a deep one to save the overtime and taking it 27-24 A&M. That'd be a close spread depending on what your book has for the line.
Wouldn't be the first time that Jerry has experienced disappointment at his own stadium for his own alma mater or his own team. So, the next game that we were covering here is featuring Texas and Mississippi State. The Bulldogs are traveling to Austin, DKR, to face Texas. Texas's first SEC in conference matchup in history. Welcome to the new SEC, Texas. And this game, is I think a battle of polar opposites. Texas is the number one team in the country according to the AP. Their statistics lend it to being number one, and we'll go over that. And they have two quarterbacks that are significantly better than any quarterback that's on staff over at Mississippi State right now.
Yeah, either quarterback here can get it done, right? Like it's looking like Manning is going to be the guy to start this game. Let Ewers rest. Don't want to hate too much on Mississippi State, but it looks like either quarterback that you have could come in here and play. So why rush a guy on injury? Manning did make some mistakes last week. He had 2 interceptions to match his 2 touchdowns. But when you're playing a team like this, the Mississippi State defense isn't stingy at all. Like they're having trouble with the turnover battle. They're not really able to get home and get sacks. They only have 4 on the year so far. And if you're Texas, you just have too many weapons, I think, to attack this Mississippi State defense. You have the running backs that are doing well, that committee there with Jared Gibson and Jaden Blue. It's too much offensively for Texas. Like there's too much there for Mississippi State to stop. Also with question marks right now at Mississippi State on who you have at quarterback. It's looking like Van Buren Jr. is going to be the starter for this week with Blake Shapen out for the season.
Yeah, and we talked about it last episode. At least really unfortunate what happened with Blake Shapen in his shoulder, but you get to see what Michael Van Buren Jr. can do for you, true freshman. Kind of see if he's the guy to build on in the quarterback room. And I'm a believer in giving players grace, right? I know in this portal era, you give them a year, it's like if they're not good enough, find someone else. But he's a true freshman, high 3-star. A little bit of research on him. I mean, he had offers from Maryland, Alabama, Arizona, Miami. So this guy's a legitimate good quarterback according to his high school rankings, which is mostly what we can go off of. Those type of schools aren't offering you if you're not a legit high 3-star. He's from Maryland, so this should be a fun starting debut for him. Exciting. I'm sure his family is going to come and support him. Where we'd like to see some more for Mississippi State to build upon is that rushing game. Johnny Daniels got involved last week. Was able to get a touchdown, and they had a couple rushing touchdowns in the season. Three touchdowns across the rushing attack last week, but Johnny Daniels led the way. He's only at 158 yards this year, and on average, Texas is giving up about 94 rushing yards a game. So that's not their number one defensive statistic. So this could lend to an opportunity for Mississippi State to establish the run early on to try to control the pace of the game.
Yeah, and anything that you're looking at for Mississippi State to maybe do to win this game, it's going to have to be either an improvement or something drastically different than they've shown us so far. So we're going to need to see either better, running back play. We know that they have the skill, but they're running behind an O-line right now that's not really good at pass protecting. They're not really good at opening holes for the run game. You have all this talent around them, and they're not able to do it because of the line. And I think that's going to be a tough test for Van Buren Jr. this week, is not being able to go through his progression against this Texas defense, find himself in the dirt a little bit. Blake Shapen was under pressure constantly when he was there, and still made things happen, but he has that tenure, that leadership capability to do it. For this offense, for Mississippi State, I'm going to need to see maybe, some run after catch, giving him opportunities at quarterback to get some easy yards early, get Kevin Coleman Jr. involved. We know he's a big playmaker. Get him the ball out wide, let him make plays with his feet. Don't force your young quarterback to be a game breaker, to be that guy that
this isn't the game
shreds
for
his
that.
defense.
This is not the game for that.
No, I mean, the Texas DBs are on right now. Like Jahdae Barron only giving up 34 yards in 4 games on 11 targets. Like Malik Muhammad, Michael Taft, like they're killing it on a DB level, and you're not going to shred them in this game.
And this is definitely not their biggest passing test. I mean, Michigan was not a huge passing test, and Colorado State was supposed to. That really wasn't, right. Texas, I'm giving more credit to their defense, but some of these teams offensively have not shown us a lot this season. Mississippi State was one of those teams that had shown us a good amount this season, but we're covering Michael Van Buren, given the news of the starting quarterback. On the offensive side for Texas, I mean, it's their world, right? 511 yards a game on offense, fourth in the conference, 321 yards in the game, passing wise, second in the conference. And like you said, whether it's going to be Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning, Arch Madness, they can take care of business. Really, they've only played again one P4, but Mississippi State's not playing like a Power 4 team on defense. So I would expect. I think Texas has like 3 receivers in the top 15 in terms of scoring for the SEC. When you look at Isaiah Bond, you look at Matthew Golden, and you look at Wingo as well. So it's going to be a tough one for Mississippi State, I would say.
And I don't want to count out Mississippi State. I'm looking at Texas. What they are probably looking in this game to, I don't want to say use it as a learning block and work some things around, because they do have a bye week and then they play Oklahoma, which is a much stingier defense. Arch Manning with the 2 interceptions against UL Monroe. If something like that happens here, Quinn Ewers might not be 100% ready to go in that game.
Right.
So from Texas, I want to see that additional development, because you do have harder defenses coming. So work the ball around, find some, get polished in a game like this. For Mississippi State, I think to win this game, they're 38.5 point dogs right now. For Mississippi State to have a chance to win this game, what the player I want to watch is Brandon Jennings there on the edge. He's going to need to get home multiple times, put pressure on Arch. Right now, Arch Manning is only 30% when he's under pressure. He's been pressured 10 times, only had 3 completions there. If you can put pressure on him, he's a great player. But
of course,
people sometimes don't operate well under pressure, and he's one of those, at least at this point in the season. So, if the defense can get pressure on him offensively, you can protect your young quarterback and let him maybe find some confidence in this game. Then you have a chance to perform at least decently in the game and not get blown out. Texas, I think you just go out and play your game, right? I think that's the key is just having too many weapons offensively.
Yeah, and those weapons, include Jaden Blue at running back, and of course all the passing receivers that we had talked about a little bit earlier. It's going to pair well against this defense. I don't see how Texas doesn't put up more than 35 points. Mississippi State's defense is averaging giving up 30.8 yards a game, and they're 7th to last in passing yards per game, and so that just lends to Texas's offense doing well. But if Mississippi State shows us some new things, could be a different game. We'll see here. Hunter, what were you saying was the kind of the over under in the spread for this game?
Yeah, so the spread's 38.5. Texas favorites right now, 61.5 on the game. Right now Texas only giving up 5.5 per game. I think Mississippi State sits right there at it in this game. Mississippi State's 6. I think Texas gets about 48 here, and doesn't go over, but Texas covers.
Yeah. I like it. I'm gonna say Texas, wins this game 42-14. So that's not the over, but close.
All right. Well, you're trusting Mississippi State to get down there, score a couple touchdowns. You mentioned the quarterback, former Oregon commit, wanted to go play for Jeff Lebby, believes in the playmaking abilities and play calling abilities down there. We'll see if he can make something happen.
The next game that we're going to cover is Oklahoma's playing Auburn. Both these teams coming off of a loss. Both teams have some questions around certain positions, but a big opportunity to build on some of their strong suits, which is the defense on both sides for Auburn and Oklahoma. Immediate thoughts when it comes to this game.
My immediate thought is that although both teams lost last game, Oklahoma, I think, has a lot more positivity around how they left that game than Auburn does. For Oklahoma, after they made the quarterback change, the game shifted a lot. They stopped Tennessee consistently. They were able to make things happen. They scored a couple times thereafter. For Auburn, they made multiple quarterback changes. Nothing really got better. They've now had 2 games this year with 5 turnovers in each. They are right at the bottom. They're tied for last in college football with Temple. on the turnover battle right now. Something
Yeah.
about Temple. Temple's played Oklahoma. They turned over the ball 6 times to Oklahoma. So
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm expecting anything different from Auburn in this game, but maybe a couple more turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, you can only go off of what you've seen in the last 3 games, not including the New Mexico game, have been just a turnover machine. And so for Auburn, this has been the talk of the town. I'm sure that they obviously know and understand their turnover challenges, and Oklahoma is good at forcing them, and hence the points that you've brought up. I think on the Auburn side, points to think positively about are going to be, Keandre Lambert from the receiving game. If when the ball is not going to the other team, it is going to Keandre Lambert, and he's proven to be this top receiver for the team. Would like to see more from Cam Coleman if they're going to have a chance to beat Oklahoma. And there's a lot of pressure that's been put on him as this true freshman phenom, and we've seen him deliver in some games, and we've seen him not play the most important role when it comes to some of these tipped interceptions. And so if that can get cleaned up, that would help Auburn here. And so the main wild card, of course, is what do we see from Peyton Thorne? Is he prepared to face a defense like this? And how does he handle being under pressure? You've talked about some of those pressure stats, and some of these in-depth analysis. So what do you got there, Hunter?
I mean, from Hugh Freeze has been kind of non-committal on who's starting this game. He said both guys have been practicing this week. It's still up in the air on who it's going to be. Right now, from a pressure standpoint, Peyton Thorne operating a little bit better under pressure. A lot of his mistakes, they've been chalked up to other things. You mentioned the Cam Coleman tips that led to interceptions. Aside from, Keandre Lambert-Smith, his players around him aren't necessarily helping on these things. They drove the length of the field in the last game, and then Damari Alston had that fumble right there. That would have been a huge momentum shift. Jarquez Hunter fumbled against Cal, leading to a touchdown to make it a 2-score game. So it's not only the quarterback play. They are the leader of the team. So you have that, it all gets blamed on them. And I don't think that's necessarily fair. But for a team like Oklahoma that's going to put a lot of pressure on a quarterback, I think that Peyton Thorne right now, from what we've seen, is operating better against that pressure. It's a positive to look at there that, this defense for Auburn is keeping their team in games in spite of this quarterback play and this offensive play, with 5 turnovers in each game, and they've only lost by 10 points. We mentioned it when we were talking about Arkansas. The Auburn defense is doing everything that they can to give their offense opportunities to not turn it over. And hey, go try to score. We're keeping you in this game. And I think that this Oklahoma defense will lend itself to the Auburn defense playing well.
I think it definitely will, and for Auburn's defense playing a key role, and keeping these games close. For the offense and collectively as a team, they're only averaging around 16 or 14 points allotted per game, and in those 2 losses to Power 4 teams, they've scored less than 17 points. And so, what we are alluding to, of course, is seeing more of the offensive side for Oklahoma. You may have touched on it, but just what we saw in that last part of the game with Michael Hawkins Jr. definitely gives you some optimism at the quarterback position. Not officially sure where they're going directionally with the QB, but if it is Hawkins for Oklahoma, that could play a key role. For Auburn, they're really strong from a rushing defense perspective, and Oklahoma is one of the worst teams in the conference when it comes to running the ball. So that should not be as much of a worry for them in this game.
Yeah, they haven't been well at running the ball, done well. Their quarterback, kind of their leading rusher there, Jackson Arnold, before getting benched here. And they're in the bottom 25 in the country on 3rd down conversion percentage. They're only converting at 28% because they're unable to run the ball and put themselves in 3rd and manageable situations. We saw Auburn struggle a little bit to contain Taylon Green's legs. They were able to stop Quentin Jackson, but both Jackson Arnold and Michael Hawkins Jr. have that ability to run, whichever one gets the start here. It's leading Michael Hawkins Jr., obviously. Right now, Hawkins has scrambled 8 times this season. They put a handful of designed runs in front of him, I think only 3 or 4, and he's been extremely efficient on those. If I'm Oklahoma, I'm looking to do a little bit more of that in this game, challenge this Auburn defense, get people out of position, so that way it opens it up a little bit more for him to make some reads. We saw it work with, Taylon Green doing the same thing. Because you don't really have a good passing threat. Right. You have Deion Burks, but other than that, you're struggling to do anything offensively, and you're relying on the defense to get you turnovers in positions to score, like they did again in Tennessee. The defense did it, put the offense in positions to score, and the offense couldn't capitalize.
Yeah. So when you think about this game, what team do you think needs this win more?
If I'm thinking about what team needs it right now, Oklahoma, looking at their schedule, I think needs this win because it's not going to get any easier for them. They play Texas, they play South Carolina, Ole Miss, and then they have Maine before they play Missouri. So they have a really tough stretch ahead. This wouldn't be one that you want to drop if you want to see success down the road because you're likely going to drop some or
Right.
one of those. I doubt that they go 4-0 in those 4 matchups, and then they do have Alabama down the stretch as well. For Auburn, it's tough to see the shining light or the silver lining if you don't win this game because it's like neither quarterback's playing well. You don't have another guy to play. They have a true freshman on the bench that they could bring up to try, but I don't think that's the issue. It's more than that.
Right.
It's deeper. It's right now it's the team itself. So I think Auburn needs it more from a culture, team, recruiting,
Yep.
coaching, motivation. Everything they look disjointed. Hugh Freeze in press conferences is killing me right now because he doesn't have an answer for it.
He doesn't have that same swagger. You got former quarterbacks coming at him with Bo Wallace on social media. It's a little bit of a circus there. You're hearing things from the quarterback, and the answer to my own question, I would say it's Auburn as well. With having UGA coming up after this game, and then also having Missouri after the bye. You lose this game, you're in a spot where you could start off 0-4 in conference, middle of October, and you're trying to have on campus visits with recruits. It's a tough pitch. On the other side for Oklahoma, they don't want to start off 0-2 in the conference, and they're still high ranked. I think I think it's like you said, it's like if you looked at that game against Tennessee, you watch the second half, you're like, okay, this is still a top 25 team. That's not the dialogue that's happening right now with Auburn.
No.
And so it could get ugly, despite all the talent that we see around at running back with Jarquez Hunter and with Keandre Lambert and Cam Coleman. That it's just not where you wanted this team to be this year, and that's nowhere near the expectations that the fans have for this program with Auburn.
No, it's not at all. And we've seen the recruiting is going well right now for them in the future seasons. But something like this does hurt the recruiting. They want to get Deuce Knight in there to flip from, I think, committed to Notre Dame right now, or, they want to continue to recruit well, but you have to have a team that's firing in all cylinders, and they don't look connected. They look disjointed. So for this game for Auburn, the keys to the game for me, it sounds simple initially, don't turn the ball over, obviously, but defensively, I think the key is that they're going to win in tight coverage. The Auburn defense is playing well, all things considered. Hawkins right now has been playing pretty close to the line of scrimmage when he goes into the game. He's not really airing it out a whole lot, keeping it tight. If you can dominate the slot, force some 3rd and longs, force this guy to be uncomfortable, we know that they don't perform well in those situations. So to me, that's the key for Auburn to win this game.
Yeah, I love all those keys, and of course, really, the analysis when you talk about Michael Hawkins and how he plays. We saw what Auburn was able to do against a mobile quarterback last week with Taylor Green, kind of somewhat controlling his opportunities on the ground and locking him up. And so the similar challenge is coming up this week with Michael Hawkins, if that is the presumed starter for this game. And so if Auburn's defense is able to do their job, honestly, all Peyton Thorne has to do is just not turn the ball over. It's been a challenge, but he had 2 touchdowns last game, and so ultimately I'm going to take Oklahoma in this game. I'm going to say it's going to be 24-14. But I struggled with making the pick there because I do think very positively and highly of Auburn, and I know if they can clean up the turnovers, this could be a completely different outcome. But I'm sticking with my pick with Oklahoma.
Yeah. See, I don't right now. I don't see a path where there's no turnovers in this game for Auburn. Like it's going to be a 2 turnover game. Like right now, I don't see that drastic shift against the Oklahoma defense, which is the best one that they faced this year so far. For Oklahoma, if they can take advantage of those opportunities that they have with the ball, like Arkansas kind of did, but Oklahoma didn't do last week against Tennessee, then they'll win this game. I have 27-17 Oklahoma winning. They're 2.5-point favorites right now on the road at Auburn. I like them winning by 10. That seems to be the theme with Auburn. Turn over the ball a lot and lose by 10. So why change it here?
We have another game that we're looking at here around the country, and this is, I think, one of the last few out of conference until we get to later in the season for some of these SEC teams. And it's South Alabama playing LSU. LSU right now is what, sitting at, is it 2-1 or 3-1?
Yep.
They have the number 15, 3-1. They have the number 15 next to their name, and they're still in that playoff discussion. This win could be really big to get to 4-1 if it plays out that way. But what do you think are some of the keys to this game for LSU?
Yeah, right now you really can't look past this game, right? You have the Sun Belt team in South Alabama. You can't look past it. LSU right now is 21.5-point favorites, but the South Alabama team is scoring a lot right now.
Mm-hmm.
They started off the year 0-2, tough loss at Ohio. We saw them play Kentucky last week. They gave up 52 at home to North Texas, but they had 58 points in those two losses alone. So the defense was really the struggle here. The former head coach there at South Alabama, defensive mind Kane Womack, now the co-DC at Alabama. So they're still trying to find their identity defensively. But then they went to Northwestern State, scored 87, and went up to Boone and absolutely crushed App State 48-14 when they were 7.5 dogs. This team is firing. They have a really solid quarterback in Gio Lopez that is a full dual threat. 843 in the air so far, 171 on the ground. Running backs are solid. The offense for the South Alabama team is really good, and we've seen this LSU team be able to get scored on. So LSU in this game needs to come out strong early instead of taking a little time to warm up like they have in the past couple weeks.
Yeah, and for LSU, they're going to have to carry that second half offensive performance and defensive performance into the first half of this game. You talked about Gio Lopez and what he's been able to do. I think he's got 9 touchdowns in the year, 86 QBR on the season. And so we're going to need to see that LSU defense, who was able to, shut out UCLA in the second half, continue that in the first half. And this is one of the more high-powered offenses. On the offensive side, I mean, Garrett Nussmeier was the SEC Offensive Player of the Week. He's receiving a ton of accolades, and outside of that small blimp on the radar with the 2 turnover game or 1 or 2 turnover game against South Carolina, he's looked really impressive. We can say what we want about the stats and how they were ultimately accumulated in certain games, but overall, he's top 2 in the SEC when it comes to yards and touchdowns. On the rushing game, it appears to be this committee system, and so for them, they're going to have to come out strong offensively. And hopefully find themselves not in an offensive shootout. If you let South Alabama hang around this game, with Gio Lopez, with Fluff Bothwell on their team, then you're in a position where you're having to kind of play in this pressure game, and all the pressure's on you. You're the Power 4 team. You're the ranked team. You're the one playing at home, and all eyes are going to be looking at LSU once again in this game that is potentially a 7-point game going into the fourth quarter, similar to the UCLA game. So,
yeah. And if it gets to that point, I think LSU will have it. You don't want to get there though. Like LSU out talents this team, but they do have Fluff Bothwell in the backfield, who is leading all freshman running backs right now in rushing yards. They have the LSU Ole Miss transfer in Control Bullock. So they're able to run the ball. They're able to throw the ball. Quarterback's able to scramble. They're doing it all apart. Defensively for South Alabama, we mentioned they've made they've had a lot of mistakes. They're getting picked apart across the middle of the field, out of the slot quite often. It's something that Nussmeier is really good at, hitting those guys in stride and letting them make plays. So I think LSU is going to be able to score pretty consistently against this team. But they've shown some weakness in coverage, shown some weakness in run stopping, and that's only going to be worse going forward with Harold Perkins Jr. out for the year. They're trying to shift some linebackers around. I could see them bringing a little bit less pressure this week, keeping some guys in coverage, keeping some things in front of them, as opposed to bringing some unique blitzes as they figure out how they want to, form this team from the linebacker position.
Yeah, and you said it lightly. I mean, LSU's defense right now is giving up, I think, 430 yards a game. We've seen some high yardage performances even from Nicholls State. We saw a good amount against USC. It looked improved, but still a high amount. And of course, USC was able to take advantage of this defense on the ground. And so, with the leading rusher from the freshman perspective coming in with Fluff Bothwell, could point to some challenges. Do we expect a big game here from Kyron Lacey? He's one of the leading SEC receivers. I think he has, I want to say, 3 or 4 touchdowns in the season right now.
Yeah, he's really good at separation early. I think that is going to be a huge piece for this LSU team, is getting separation quick off the line, letting these guys make plays in space. Aaron Anderson, another one. I could see those two guys both having pretty big games here.
Yeah, and this could be the game of the day. And there's a lot of like high profile games. We have one more game to cover, and everybody's going to know what it is if you're listening to the full length episode. If you're listening to the snippet here, go to our page. But this could be one of the more fun, interesting, unexpected games, right? Kind of a March Madness, like small school versus big school game, and so we're excited for it. I'm thinking it could be an offensive shootout. I'm going to say 35-21 LSU down in the swamp. What are you thinking?
It's a little closer than I got it. 21.5 point dogs here. I got 17-37 LSU winning at home, but ultimately giving up another 17 points like they did with UCLA. In an offensive battle at the beginning, I think it's the same. I think we'll see the same thing. LSU turn it on late and start to realize where they're at, who they need to be.
Definitely. So we got one more game to cover here. I think it's only right. I passed the mic over to Hunter Ziesman to kind of lead the way for this one.
Man, it is. It feels like it should be a playoff game. It feels like it should be the SEC championship, but it's regular season. Georgia, Alabama, college game day is going to be there. This is the first time, though, since 2007 that Alabama is an underdog at home. This Georgia team looks strong. They're number 2 in the country right now. Alabama number 4. But this right now is going to be paving the future of this rivalry in the SEC, because it's the first time for Kalen DeBoer to face an SEC opponent here at Alabama. We'll see if Kirby Smart can continue to be himself and put forth a nearly flawless Georgia team. But we've seen him struggle against Alabama in years past. But the slate seems fresh here. The slate seems clean. Who's going to be the guy? And I think it's going to be a chess match, because talent-wise, it matches up pretty solid across the board. Alabama, a couple more 5 stars. Georgia, a couple more 4 stars. But really, the talent on both sides of the ball is there. It's a chess match now.
Yeah, it's really a chess match. And I think that the two, king pieces, or some say the queen pieces, are the most dominant in chess, but we'll go kings, are going to be Jalen Milroe and Carson Beck. They're pretty close in terms of passing yards. 680, I want to say, for Carson Beck, 615 or 618 for Jalen Milroe, and a lot of their stats are similar. So when you think about this quarterback matchup, what are some things that stand out to you, Hunter?
The things that stand out to me right now is for Alabama, the difference between Jalen Milroe last year at the beginning of the season, through the progression of the middle to late last season to where he is now, is the offense has slowly developed around his strengths. And Jalen Milroe is developing a identity for this offense. And they're adding the designed runs. They're throwing the ball deep, which he's been exceptional at with receivers that can do it. We've seen Ryan Williams. If he can fix, he's fumbled a couple times this year. We saw that be an issue last year. But all in all, right now, he's pretty dynamic. And if you're looking at film in Georgia this week, you're wondering, how do we contain this guy? Because if we can contain this guy, that's it, because he is that game breaker. Last year for Georgia on the other side of the ball, when you're looking at Carson Beck, he had some key playmakers around him that he didn't necessarily have to be the, all-star knight in shining armor making the plays. He had Brock Bowers, he had Ladd McConkey. This year we haven't seen. They had a deep tight end room this year, but we haven't seen, Lawson Lucky or Oscar Delp really emerge. They have the wide receivers who are playing well, but from Carson Beck, he's trying to become that number 1 guy for them. And it's going to have to be the number 1 guy for them this game to be that game breaker. And it is quarterback versus quarterback is really the battle here.
No, and it really is, and I think you hit on some of the points for Georgia. Everyone's talking about what they are missing out on because you're not seeing that production replaced this year. You look at where some of the receivers rank in the conference, and just looking at the receivers in this conference, this is hands down one of the best receiving conferences in the country. But Colby Young is leading the way. He's 12th. He's 12th in the conference in touchdowns. 31st in yards with Dominic Lovett. So it's just, you don't have those guys like Ladd McConkey last year and Brock Bowers, who can not just make plays in the air, but Brock was able to make plays on the ground, right? They made certain plays last year to get the ball in his hands on some of these reverses where he could just, do things that not many football players can do, and getting these big 20-yard plays to drive momentum. There's an opportunity to see more on the passing game. And so on the other side, Jalen Milroe has looked very, very, very flawless, and similarly to Carson Beck, because they both have no turnovers on the year in terms of interceptions. They're playing pretty well, efficient football. But Milroe has not seen a passing defense like this yet this season, because this is the number one passing defense in the country when it comes to yards given up, led by linebacker like CJ Allen, Malachi Starks, who's got 1 pick on the year, even freshman phenom KJ Bolden. They were able to pluck him over from being a Florida State commit to have him go play over at Georgia, and that defense has played a very important role with keeping this team in all the games to still be undefeated.
Yeah, the defense for Georgia is playing solid. We didn't know if it was a fluke game from Clemson early on, but we saw them throttle NC State. So, Georgia did have an answer for that. They answered Kentucky, and they were scoreless didn't score a touchdown in that game, kept them to field goals. The Georgia defense is very, very good. What Georgia is also doing offensively really well is their outside runs. They have great running backs. They do have talent, like from the wide receivers, from the tight ends. They have talent. It's just figuring out how to incorporate them. On the outside run game right now, that's going to be a huge piece for Georgia in this game in setting them up for success. Alabama hasn't been good at stopping the run right now. They're third to last in rush yards allowed in the SEC, 132.3 a game right now. It's going to be up to Alabama to set that edge. If not, Georgia's going to put themselves in a lot of good positions to continue to move the chains. I can see the Titans getting involved a little bit more in this game. Alabama linebackers have been pretty solid in coverage to this point this year, but those are talented tight ends that are going to be able to get open across the middle of the field. That's an offensive play style that Georgia likes to do, and that can move the chains for them. And I think that Georgia will be able to score on this Alabama defense, because we've seen some lapses in the Alabama defense that, if they were playing better opponents, would have been taken advantage of.
Yeah, and if they can be taken advantage of by some of these playmakers that Georgia's brought in with Dominic Lovett and with Colby Young at receiver, that would be impressive. The running game is led to wanting to see more. Georgia is bottom 4 in the conference, but they have that talent, like you said. You have Trevor Etienne, you have Nate Frazier at running back. This 2-headed duo leading the way, and so, based upon what we've seen from Alabama this year against USF, against a little bit against Wisconsin with Ches Maluzzi, there is an opportunity to establish the run. And, in years past, it's like Georgia was run first, pass second. And now it feels like they're trying to be pass first, run second. And I don't know if they have the guys around them to do that. And so it lends to an interesting game. But I feel like the posture for a lot of Alabama fans is, we've seen this story before. Georgia is leading the way in a lot of statistical categories. They have all the talent. They match up evenly, or maybe sometimes more advantageously, and Alabama comes in and puts belt to ass, right? So it's like, you can look at all the stats, but then sometimes you're like, is this just Bama's game? Because this is what they've proven to do in the past. Like, no bias. So just some of my thoughts there.
Yeah, and who is that dependent on, right? Like, was it a Nick Saban thing? But it's been at neutral sites, and more so kind of leaning Georgia's way. They're playing at Atlanta quite often against each other. Now they're here in Tuscaloosa. It's going to be a loud stadium, and Alabama's only getting better right now. And both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, Alabama coaching staff has mentioned the bag of tricks we're not out of the bag of tricks yet. Like, you haven't seen everything, and I don't think we've seen everything defensively. We've played a lot of man coverage so far at Alabama. Given up, some receivers running free. I could see some different looks there that confused this Georgia offense. And then offensively, I think we're going to continue to see Jalen Milroe be a little bit more deceptive. Right now, the film and what Georgia is looking at is stopping him from getting outside of the pocket and running on design quarterback runs. He's had 19 designed runs outside of the tackles. He scored 5 touchdowns and 129 yards on those 19 runs. So they know how to get him open in space. If Georgia's looking for that, I could see a couple more tricky plays, running the option a little bit better, getting some pitches to these strong running backs in Jam Williams and Justice Haynes, and making it happen on the ground. That opens it up for that deep ball. He's going to throw that deep ball early and often in this game. Ryan Williams will be down the field, but you got to be careful. Malachi Starks is pretty good at picking those off. We've seen some gymnastics catches from him, but if you can force him to stay, for over top coverage, opens up the run game and vice versa. I like the idea of what Alabama can maybe bring to this game offensively that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, and you talked about the planned runs versus the scrambles, right? And I think you mentioned there's only been 5 or 6 scrambles this year from Jalen Milroe, and right now, Georgia's run defense is their biggest weakness. So when you think about keys to this game, whose weakness stands out more? Georgia's run defense, Georgia's pass offense or offense in general, or Alabama's defense when it comes to stopping the run against this talented running back room. That's going to be the 3 keys to the game for me. Something about this game feels like Kirby Smart feels like rent is due. I don't know what's worse, playing them coming off of a tough close win or a dominant win with a bye week, but for some reason I got to go with the dogs in this one. So
okay, yeah, I mean the game is going to be interesting because it's too tough to call until we see it on the field because of who these teams have played so far. Alabama hasn't played. They played Wisconsin, but they haven't really played. Wisconsin was at half strength, right? So for UGA, if they can stop the run and stop Milroe getting out of there, and put him in a position where he has to pass, he hasn't been effectively throwing the ball in that mid-range category. If they can stop him from running and forcing him to throw deep, it's not a recipe for continued success throughout the day. Offensively, they need to do it in the trenches, protect Carson Beck. We saw Kentucky get to him too often, and that threw him off of his rhythm. They were able to stop that run until late in the game. For Alabama, if they can find the rhythm offensively, get some of those run plays, throw the ball deep, get a couple more run plays, throw the ball deep, get a screen in there. It's too hard to stop because Milroe is very accurate. His legs, he's too explosive. Alabama being at home, I think, is the thing that turns this needle one way or another for me. I like Alabama winning 24-20. They are 2-point underdogs in this one in a low over under of 48.5.
I hear that. Like I said, I think I like this game, 20-14.
Okay.
Georgia. I'm expecting Georgia's defense to hold strong from a passing perspective. I think I would say I'm more confident in Alabama's ability to come back from behind than Georgia's, however, just given what I've seen on the offensive side for Alabama. But something about this game, I think Kirby wants it. He wants to crown this as his conference. And so I have Georgia in this game 20-14.
All right. We will see. I mean, this is the kind of game that if you're an Alabama fan, you live for these. If you're a recruit looking to go to Alabama, this is the game that you're trying to attend. I think there's going to be basketball players, recruits for Alabama here at this game. Get everybody in Tuscaloosa. It's going to be a packed house.
The former POTUS is going.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a packed house, and I don't know if it's gonna be a bar game. I live in here in Georgia. That has nothing to do with my pick, but I live in Georgia. So I don't know if I want to go out to the bar or be at home and hear the audio. I love kind of hearing the announcers and eating some good wings and some pizza and just taking it in. Like, this is what college football is about, these type of matchups when we get them during the regular season, and they play a role in the playoffs, but they don't eliminate a team necessarily, which is so exciting.
No, it doesn't eliminate a team. And I mentioned it early on, like it almost it doesn't on paper, but it almost feels like it punches a ticket because whatever team wins this game, you've won such a big matchup.
Yep.
For Alabama, at least you're looking down the rest of the schedule stretch and you're seeing Tennessee, you're seeing Missouri, but you're feeling confident. Georgia has a pretty tough road ahead, but if they win this game, they're feeling pretty confident going down the stretch because you beat a team that has some really unique capabilities and you beat them on the road. So this is a huge game for the landscape of the SEC and shaking up that top spot where all the teams sit. Whoever wins this game's got to be number one.
Massive game. And so, if you end up listening to the preview, fans, let us know what you think are the keys to this game and, who you think is going to play the biggest role in this game if you have a chance to listen to this. And so we really appreciate everyone taking the time to listen, tune in. It's been really fun here talking about the SEC and looking at college football from the SEC lens. That's right. The conference with, I want to say 6 teams in the top 12. So still the best tier, but thank you for tuning in. We're excited and, enjoy the weekend, and we'll come to you soon.